Peter Garrett didn't want to say what his position was on whether public schools have enough money, but I'm sure both of you will tell us what you think this morning. Amanda Rishworth, first to you. Let's cut to the chase. Do public schools get enough money?
Well, look, we have, as a government, initiated a review into looking at school funding. Under this government, there has been significant increases both in capital expenditure for schools, but also down at the schools, whether you're looking at literacy or numeracy programs. So this government has been very much focused on education, very much putting the money in. When we look at the My School website, though, what we're looking at is greater transparency. I mean, yes, there's information about funding so that parents have that information, but we're also looking at information that shows progress of students. And in fact, on this My School 2.0, you're actually seeing being able to actually track students, which is very important. So it is important to have this information out there. It is important to have a debate, but this is not going to take away, or is indeed very separate from the fact that the government is working through these issues and through the school review.
But when you look at this site yourself, surely you must have a view on whether public schools, and the difference I've pointed to there with the averages, but in some specific local areas, there's a bigger difference between what the local public school gets and what the private school gets. Do you have a personal view on this at all?
Well, look, this is an issue that the government's working through. In terms of my local area, all the schools are, really welcome more government funds, and I work with those schools to look at, the different things that can benefit the schools, including money for low socioeconomic schools to actually help them improve their literacy and numeracy. So it's not as simple as just making the old dichotomy between private and public. We've got to actually respond to what the local schools need, what works in local schools in different areas around the country, whether you're in a rural area or a regional area versus a metropolitan area. So I think the issue is much broader, but when we get back to My School, what we're really looking at is more transparency for parents so that they can start delving into this information that hasn't been available for them before.
I'm sure many of them will be. Josh, what do you reckon? Is there anything wrong with giving parents this information?
Look, David, Amanda's dodged the key question here. Will the Labor government reduce funding for independent and Catholic schools? We're all in favour of greater transparency, particularly for parents. That's important. But what we don't want to see is the return of Mark Latham's hit list of independent and other schools, because Julia Gillard was part of Mark Latham's team, a close ally of his, and I think deep down Labor wants to see reduced funding for independent and Catholic schools. And my experience is, and I have over 50 schools in my electorate, is that a lot of parents who send their kids to an independent or Catholic school don't actually have pockets full of money ready to dispense on high school fees. They actually make a choice. And that goes to the heart of the Liberal Party's philosophy. We believe in choice in education and healthcare and other areas.
I'm sure that's
so
right.
I sound a very big warning here that Labor may have an ulterior and dangerous motive.
That's just not the case, and I think you know it. Once again, another scare campaign from the Liberal Party. The funding that we've provided has been equal to non-government and government schools through the Building the Education Revolution, and we now taking the appropriate step, the appropriate step to actually move forward with the school funding review. So I think you're probably falling into the old dichotomy there, and we're in a new era, and it's been this government that's actually increased money to schools.
Josh, what do you think those parents, and I accept that a lot of parents who do send their kids to independent schools don't necessarily have pockets full of money. What do you think they will make of the sort of figures they're going to see on this website? Do you think they'll be comfortable seeing that their kids are funded to the tune of about $2,500 more a year? Will they think that that's really not much more?
Look, I think it's hard to generalise. I just read the front page of the Australian today where it talked about, some of these figures, and they do vary between schools. So I think it's going to be, it's case by case when it comes to parents' own assessments. One thing I would point out is that the high cost of put towards educating those with disabilities, and I think that raises a really important issue here, that we need to continually to fund education for kids with disabilities because of the much higher costs involved.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is going to dispute that. Let's move on to detention policy, another contentious issue. The government has confirmed it's opening another asylum seeker centre near Darwin. This one will house 1,500 asylum seekers. The opposition, of course, is saying this is another reminder that the so-called processing centre, regional processing centre Julia Gillard wants to open at East Timor is off in the never ever. Here was Tony Abbott speaking on the Nine Network this morning.
There's only one solution to this particular problem, and that's to stop the boats, and the boats will just keep coming unless the government changes policy. Now, I guess the particular detention centre that they're opening in Darwin it's yet another broken promise, and this year already we've seen 3 broken promises. They said there'd be no more onshore detention centres, and plainly there are. They said that there would be a federal takeover of hospitals, and plainly there's not going to be. And then, of course, there's the carbon tax, which was the ultimate broken promise, which we've been debating all week in Parliament.
We'll get to the carbon tax in a minute, but on the detention centre, Amanda, what's happened to East Timor? No one in the region has put their hand up to say they really like the idea. It does seem to have fallen off the radar.
Well, that's not true at all. In fact, Julia Gillard discussed it with the Malaysian Prime Minister visiting yesterday. We will work through the Bali process. Well, look, we'll work through the Bali process looking for regional agreement, but this is never going to be an easy issue. But we will continue to work through it with our neighbours because we do believe a regional framework is the best way to move forward with this.
The problem is none of them do. None of them have actually said, yes, we really want to do this.
Well, of course, they need to see more detail, and we're working through that detail. But in fact, President Ramos Horta actually, after we provided him a paper on this, said that he found it very interesting and did address a number of different issues. So these things are never going to be easy. If we think we can just go in and do this quickly, that was never the case, and we made that quite clear. We'll continue to work through the Bali process. But coming back to the opposition, you notice that Tony Abbott has not said whether or not he agrees with this detention centre. He's just used his simple slogan, stop the boats,
That's not true.
And doesn't actually have a policy to back it up. So, Josh, what would be your policy on this detention centre? Once again, it comes back to just stop the boats. Well, we're not going to treat it in such a simplistic way.
Josh.
We're working through these issues.
David, look, this is a massive fiasco on the behalf of the Labor Party here. We had the Secretary of State of East Timor say yesterday that it's not even on the radar. We had the Malaysian Prime Minister in Australia yesterday raising his concerns with it, saying, you know, it could raise the likelihood of more people seeking asylum. This has been a litany of mistakes on behalf of the Labor Party, and the reason is Julia Gillard doesn't believe it. And Amanda, we have a very simple solution. It's Nauru. It's worked in the past and it will work again. After John Howard announced an offshore processing centre in Nauru, when he was in government, 19 days after, the doors were open and it was very successful. And if you look at the number of people in detention today, 6,600 people. In November 2007, when the Howard government left office, there were only 4 people who had arrived by boat that were in detention. Now, those figures are alarming. There's been a massive cost blowout of $1.5 billion because of the Labor's failed policies. And obviously Amanda didn't listen to Senate estimates the other day when the Secretary of the Immigration Department said no other country had even agreed to this idea. So Australia is out there alone. It's going to never happen. And as a consequence, you are building another detention centre in Australia, as Tony Abbott said, another broken promise.
Well, look, Josh, quite frankly, as always happens with the Liberal Party, of course, never looks at the
facts.
Never looks at the facts. That's right. The people are moving around the world at the moment. There are people moving around the world and seeking asylum in countries all around the world.
They move around the world all the time. There's no denying this is a particular...
There has been an increase in people moving around the world. That's become quite clear. If you look at the number of people coming to Australia, it clearly follows the increase of people moving around the world. So, you know, once again, the Liberal Party...
The situation in Sri Lanka was settled a while ago now. I'm not sure if there's any particular spike, this year to blame for what we're seeing with the continued arrival of asylum seekers, is there?
Well, look, there is a lot of disruption around the world. If you look at Afghanistan, a whole range of places, there is disruption around the world, and people are going to seek asylum. They're seeking asylum in many countries around the world. To suggest that it's only Australia that these people come to is quite ridiculous. And
who has said that? Who has said that, Amanda?
Well,
come on. You've got 6,600 people sitting in detention. We had 4 that arrived by boat. Now you are building an onshore detention centre, and there's a complete failure of your policy. Why don't you admit the failure?
Well, what you suggest is not right, and I reject that. But to suggest that if we just start processing on Nauru, it will suddenly go away. If we just say stop the boats, then suddenly people will stop coming to Australia. We want to look for a long-term solution. That is why we are pursuing the East Timor or the East Timor regional processing framework. We will continue to work through the Bali process with that and engage with our neighbours, and we will continue to do that and work through this important process.
We've got to take a break. We'll continue during the break. I'm sure you two can keep discussing this, and then we'll have a look at what's happening with this carbon tax debate that's been dominating Parliament during the week. Stay with us.